Hello, and welcome back to Pace Law Firm. We're joined again today by immigration expert Andy Semichuk. Andy, you've mentioned the area of cross-border couples and spousal sponsorships in previous interviews. Now let's assume you have a client living in Canada who is married a U.S. citizen and wants to immigrate to the U.S. How does the process start?
Well, usually the process starts with an interview by telephone or perhaps in person, where I talk with the client and determine what the needs are. If the needs are indeed that they want to go south into the United States to be sponsored by their spouse, then we deal with them by way of a legal services agreement. We sign up a legal services agreement in which they engage us to do the work for them.
What is involved in the legal service agreement?
In the agreement, they appoint me as their lawyer. We talk about the cost of the services. We set out the time frame involved. And basically, they authorize us to represent them with the government in the United States to file the application.
What do the intake forms and checklists of the documents entail?
That's the next step. Following the signing of the legal services agreement, we have an intake form and a checklist of documents that we provide the client. In the intake form, the client gives us the normal information: date of birth, name, address, etc. And the checklist of documents will include things like the marriage certificate, copy of the passport of the individual going into the United States and of the individual sponsoring the spouse from abroad, things like that.
What happens once you cover the intake form and checklist?
Well, once we get this information from the clients, the intake information we use to compile an application for them, a series of documents, which we forward on to the client for review and to make corrections if there are any problems with the answers that we've provided in the forms. They send out the corrections to us, and we correct the master documents. And we compile the forms that we've prepared together with all the copies of the documents that the clients have provided to us into a package, which I review and make sure that everything is correct from A to Z. And if everything is correct, then I sign off on it and we send it off to the client. Then the client reviews the entire package, makes sure that they're 100% satisfied with everything that's in there, that everything is correct the way they want it, and they sign off, and then we submit it to the government for processing.
Andy, what does the National Visa Center do?
Well, once the documents are submitted to the Immigration Service, first the relevant servicing center will go through the package and make sure everything is in order. And essentially, they first look at the sponsoring spouse, the U.S. citizen, and make sure that that person is eligible to sponsor the immigrant from abroad. Once they are approved, the U.S. spouse is approved, the documents then go to the National Visa Center. And the National Visa Center acts as a kind of a quarterback, coordinating all the work for the consulate. So ultimately, the consulate is ready to interview the client, the Canadian spouse, when they're called in for an interview. The National Visa Center looks after medicals and police clearances and just makes sure that the file is completely correct, and then sends it on to Montreal, the U.S. consulate in Canada that handles these matters.
Okay, then what happens in Montreal?
In Montreal, they call in the client from Canada, that is to say, for an interview. In other words, the client usually comes into Montreal, goes through the actual medical the day or two before the interview, and then goes through an interview, which is relatively brief. It might be an hour or so, in which they review all the documents, make sure everything is in order, and ultimately approve the client for immigration to the United States. And that's basically the interview in Montreal.
Now, is that when the applicant gets the green card?
No. Following that interview, the applicant actually receives a package by mail from the U.S. consulate from Montreal, and that applicant takes the package with them to a port of entry and delivers it there. And there they are approved and allowed to land, so-called land in the United States, become a permanent resident, and only a few weeks later, the actual green card comes to the applicant in the mail at the address in the United States where the applicant is living.
Is this something I can do without using a lawyer?
Well, you could do something like this if you tried and if you have the time and patience to do it. It's something like doing your income taxes. Some people do their own income taxes, but most people rely on an accountant to do their taxes. Or, for example, if you're selling your house, you could sell it yourself, but most people use a real estate agent. Or, for that matter, you could pull a tooth. Let's say you have a bad tooth, you could tie a string to it, tie the other end of the string to a door and slam the door to pull the tooth. Or you can go to a dentist and have a dentist do it. The same applies here. We do the job professionally and are available for clients to do it when they want to do it professionally.
So why should clients choose you instead of another lawyer?
The reason is because I've been working in this field for over 30 years. I've helped over 10,000 clients with legal problems, and I am a member of the bar of both the United States and Canada. So this is an area that I've focused on, and unlike other lawyers who often are only members of one jurisdiction or the other, they're just not as familiar with the issues as I am.
Finally, Andy, all of this sounds pretty expensive. How much will it cost?
Well, compared to the expense of paying for legal services to do this work, has to be compared to something else, the expense of not getting it done right if something goes wrong, for example. And when you have something important, such as bringing a spouse to come and live with you permanently into the United States, you want to make sure it's done right and that there aren't errors or mistakes that could screw up everything for you in terms of your relationship. So generally speaking, it's an important investment, and more importantly, we're affordable. This is a very competitive field. We have to compete with all the other immigration attorneys that are out there also working in the area, so we have to be affordable, and we are.
Okay, Andy. Thanks again for joining us. Everyone else, check in at pacelawfirm.com for more information. Thank you.